Welcome to Microsoft Ignite 2020 and specifically to this skilling video. Today I'm going to be talking about how to fulfill regulatory compliance with Microsoft 365 communication compliance. My name is Christoph Eisinger. I'm a principal program manager on the security and compliance team, and definitely a pleasure to talk about my favorite topic today. So let's get started. Now, what you're looking at here is Microsoft 365 Compliance Center. So this is the home page where we have all our compliance solutions, whether it's to help you with regulatory compliance, whether it's to help you with record keeping, retentions, information protections, and so forth. Again, the topic du jour is communication compliance. So what I'm going to do is click on that left-hand side solution called communication compliance. And that's what you're seeing right now. You're seeing the home page for communication compliance. Now we put a set of demo data for this session, and we'll get to that later. Well, due to give you a full screen experience for this demo purposes, I'll collapse the left navigation to really highlight the product. So what you're looking at here is the list of policies that we have to fulfill different use cases that Microsoft Communication Compliance helps you with. Again, specifically today, I'll talk about how to fulfill regulatory compliance. What I mean by that is whether you're in financial services, whether you're in healthcare, or if you're, for instance, in education, by law, you've got, if you're in education, you got to protect minors if you're a school district. But if you're a bank, there's Security and Exchange Commission, or a FINRA if you're based in the US, and there's laws, for instance, that you need to make sure you're following to ensure there's no collusions, conflict of interest, insider trading, and so forth. So in this demo, there's really two big parts. The first part is I'll show you how easy it is to configure a policy to fulfill your regulatory compliance. And then the second demo is, okay, let's say I got a policy in place. Let's show you how you can investigate and remediate potential violations. So let's get started. So in here, I've already created a set of policy. I'll show you one that I've already created. It's called Insiders. So I'll select the policy and click on Edit. And what you can see here is a simple step-by-step wizard to, in this case, edit, but it would be the same wizard that you would go through to create a policy from scratch. So in this case, I just needed to give it a name and a description. Now, in this screen, this is where you choose who do you want to monitor with this policy. In this case, by default, we have the ability to monitor all users in your tenant. Or if you want to be more granular, you can start selecting individual distribution groups or individual employees. And that's what you're seeing here. I've got both the Northwind traders, the sales team, and one of my employees called Lee. The other second field that I haven't used here is you can say, let's say it was a distribution group, you can exclude specific people from that group. So I'd say that distribution groups had hundreds or thousands of employees. You can maybe remove specific individuals from that list. And last but not least, under the reviewers, this is where you're going to say, here's the different folks in my organization that are going to review potential violations captured by this policy. Now, again, depending on the use case, it could be someone from compliance. Typically, if it's about regulatory compliance. But as we're showing you in another skilling video, it's about code of conduct violation. The reviewer might be folks from your human resources team or even from your legal team, depending on the use case and the folks that are reviewing these things. The next thing you're going to do is you've defined the audience. Now you need to define what communication channels do you want to analyze. Now, the first grouping is all the first-party communication channels that comes with Microsoft 365. So obviously email, Yammer, even Skype as we transition to Teams, and obviously Teams is definitely a top of mind from customers this day and age as everyone's working remotely. Now, as I mentioned, we can monitor obviously first-party app, but we're also fully aware that there's a plethora of third-party app where your employees can communicate on. Let me give you a couple examples. SMS, WhatsApp, Instant Bloomberg, Zoom, Slack, blah, 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 and the list goes on. And that's that list that you're seeing below with different checkboxes. So in this case, everything is checked, but you can like a la carte and checking specific one of those depending on what you want to scope for this policy. To show you a little bit, how did we get there? Here's where you would configure all those connectors to third-party app. So here I kind of left aside communication compliance. So this is typically a step you would pre-configure. You go on the left-hand side in our compliance centers and you see a node called data connectors, and you go click on connectors and you say add connector. And again, you're seeing the richness of all those third-party apps that we can archive in our systems and then apply supervision to fulfill regulatory compliance. So this is where you configure all those third-party apps. Very easy to do. Let me show you quickly where you would configure third-party connectors that you could use in Microsoft Communication Compliance. So you can simply go in Microsoft Compliance Center on the left-hand side, click on Data Connectors, then click on Connectors. And as you can see here, you're seeing all the different connectors that we have, whether it's Instant Bloomberg, Bloomberg Mail, WhatsApp, SMS, and so forth. So I highly recommend, if you're not seeing the connectors that you wish to use, there's probably a good chance that we're working on it. So definitely stay tuned on our connectors roadmap. And basically the way it would work is you would select one such as Instant Bloomberg, and then you would get that wizards, again, very similar to when we're configuring a policy in communication compliance, and it gives you the step-by-step on what you need to do to configure such connectors. Now let's go back to the communication compliance policy that we're working on. So again, I've configured connectors, and I've chosen basically the communications I want to monitor. And then this screen, conditions and percentages, where you're going to decide what type of patterns and behavior are you looking for. Are you looking for collusions? Are you looking for insider trading? Are you looking for gift giving or customer complaints? You decide. What I've done in this policy is I've configured a number of things that I'm looking for. First of all, I'm using some of the pre-canned templates that we have in Microsoft 365 to look for very specific number patterns. In this case, I'm looking for routing numbers, credit card numbers, or bank account numbers that are being shared. Last but not least, I also have a row, as you notice here, called Insider's Lexicon. So basically, I've also added my list of keywords that signify insider trading that I want to monitor. The second conditions that I've added here is I want to filter newsletters. And the reason is I know some of my employees are getting newsletters either from different news outlets, or maybe you get notified when you do an online order for flowers to your significant ones, whatever. And I want to ignore those communications because I don't want to be inundated with what we call false positives. So what I do, that's what I did here. It's very easy to define either newsletters you want to ignore or a specific domain you want to ignore. And you can imagine you can have hundreds of those. Now, how did we get to define those sensitive type? Let me show you very quickly. So I would click on Add, and then it invokes that side panel. And you can see here the list of all the different templates that we have out of the box in Microsoft 365. And as I mentioned, you can also augment that with your own lexicon, with your own dictionary of keywords that you want to analyze. And keywords could be obviously in English, or it could be in any language, whether it's a Latin language or double byte languages such as Japanese, Chinese, or Korean. Continuing our policy definition, you can also continue and add more and more granular conditions to, again, really narrow down what you're looking for and reduce the noise to a minimum. And here you can see the extent of all the richness of all the conditions you can apply. In this policy, I'll stick to the 2 conditions that I've defined. And the last thing you need to do is define what we call the review percentage. So basically, this enables you to do percentage sampling of all the communications that matches the conditions above. And typically this is used because the volume of communications might still be too high. So if it's 10%, what that means is out of, let's say, 10 messages that match any of the condition above, only 1 out of 10 will be surfaced for you to investigate and remediate. That means potentially there's 9 out there that you're not going to get to see. So again, depending on your need, depending on the volume, it could be 10% or whatever, any percentage, or you can say, I'm going to go 100%, so I'm going to make sure I don't miss a single beat with regards to insiders. This screen is pretty much a recap of everything that you've defined, all those parameters, and just hit save, and voila, you're done. You get a confirmation. The policy takes about an hour to be created, and up to 24 hours to capture content such as third party or or team messages. So that transitions to the second part of the demo I want to do today. We've showed you how to configure a policy and how rich it is. Let's pretend we get that policy that has been running, and let's show you how you would investigate and remediate potential regulatory violations. So again, we're back to our home screen. And in this case, we're going to click on the insider policy. And you can see in this homepage, we give you a set of pulses of top violators, age of pending items, that might stress how far behind you are or if you're on top of your game. And obviously, as a reviewer, the other thing I didn't mention is permissions to this is only scoped to the folks that were reviewers in the policy, and you get additional permissions that you need to set up. We're also showing you alerts on a high volume of matches that we've detected. So let's click on the pending tab and let's show you some of those violations and actions. And in the next couple minutes, I'll show you different type of violations we've detected, and then I'll transition to show you additional information you can get so that you can then make the final decision of what is the remediation that I want to take with each of the violation. So in this case, this is a simple email that we've matched. And the first question typically is, why are we surfacing that email for me to review? And when you click on the text view, suddenly we do highlighting of all the matches. So you can see here, I was both detecting keywords. Remember that lexicon that I defined as a condition. And remember, I was also looking for numeric patterns such as routing number, and that's what you can see at the bottom. Let me show you other messages that get captured. In this case, this is an email which has no text, just an attachment. And the attachment is this beautiful Word document. And again, you might say, oh, this is a great document. It's 4 pages, but it could be 20 pages. How am I going to find why this email with this attachment trigger my insider trading policy? And again, you just click on the text view and automatically we parse the document, and we're going to highlight the portion of the document that match your conditions. So in this case, in the body of this beautiful Word document, I've got, again, using a routing number. And again, you might say, is this a telltale sign of some insider trading? Now, this works with Word document. It could have been a PowerPoint. It could have been a PDF. It could have been an Excel spreadsheet. This is just an example of the richness of the detection. No need to download anything. Right there in line, you can see why those items get matched and then make a decisions on what to do next. Let's show you also how we can detect third-party content. So in this case, you're looking at instant Bloomberg messages, but as I showed when we were doing the configuration, it could have been WhatsApp, it could have been Bloomberg email, and so forth. So in this case, you get a chat from Megan, and what we're doing is we're doing what we call conversation reconstruction. So by nature of this tool, it's pretty chatty, so automatically we're stitching together the conversation, so it's very easy to review it in one context versus individual messages. Similar to what I was discussing earlier is then I can click on the text view, and again, we can highlight why did this instant Bloomberg message get flagged for review. So in this case, Megan is using one of the keywords that I'm monitoring, which is insider. So that's another example of detecting insider trading, in this case, over instant Bloomberg. But let's continue the list of the different detection we can do. So in this case, let's go back to that initial email that I started with. And then if you can see at the top there's 2 indicators, near duplicate and exact duplicate, that have a count in between. What that means is automatically we're looking at conversations that have similar text, and it doesn't matter whether it's an email, an instant Bloomberg, a Yammer, a Teams. Across all those modalities, we're detecting that it's almost similar, which is what we call a near duplicate, or exactly similar, which is an exact duplicate. And in this case, so automatically it gives you intelligence. You can imagine that you get hundreds or thousands of messages. In this case, potentially it signifies that maybe Grady, that fictitious character I'm using in my demo, maybe was trying to game the systems by using a whole bunch of channels, thinking he could escape, when we're showing you as an investigator that no, he's been going at it. He was been trying to game the systems from different angles. So that's exact and near duplicate, where we're applying intelligence to help you sort through the sea of messages that get captured. Now let's switch now to Teams. And before I do that, the other thing that you get is obviously you get a lot of messages, and depending on your use case, depending on how you feel, regardless, there might be different way on how you go about reviewing those messages. So we introduced the ability to filter data, and there's a lot of filter. You can filter by date, you can filter by senders, and so forth. But the one I've chosen is called item class. So that enables to filter by the different communication channels you're monitoring. So for instance, here I select item class, and I picked, now you can see the drop down, I picked Skype Teams messages, and I applied that, and now my view on the left-hand side, I only see team messages. Now, both team messages that we can monitor are both one-to-one private message, but also messages on Teams channel. So a couple of things I want to learn here is, first, we work with Teams. Automatically, we're going to detect membership. So if a member, in this case, Grady, is part of a team channel today, and tomorrow he joined yet another one, and the day after he creates another one, automatically we're going to monitor that person is a member of more and more teams, and automatically we're going to monitor the additional teams that this user is a member of. So, you as a administrator that configured a policy, you don't need to worry about that. The other thing that we did is, we know some of you are still running Exchange on premises and still want to enable Teams. Workforce can work remotely. And guess what? We'll also support that. So we can, even though some of the account might have Exchange on-prem, but you're rolling out Teams, we can still monitor Teams for those. So those are some of the announcements we made recently. Now let's look specifically at this message. The first thing I want to call out is similar to when I was showing you the examples with Bloomberg, is we're doing what we call conversation threading or conversation reconstruction. The idea is, obviously, this is a chat app, and it's a lot of back and forth. Here I was a little verbose for this example, but typically it's only a couple words back and forth between different colleagues. Now, the first thing you might ask is, okay, great, we've reconstructed this conversation from Grady. Why do we see a match? And again, I click on text view, and we start seeing in yellow the highlight of why we're showing you those specific instant message from this individual. Guess what? The first one had some routing number, and that was one of the conditions that I show you when I configure my policy. We also have the word leak, which is yet another keyword that we're looking for, and we want to analyze. The next thing we give you is we give you more context about the user. Is this person a first-time offender? Is he a repeat offender? How many matches do we have? And to access all that information, you would just click on the user history. It will also give you a quick glimpse, from your organization, the person's profile, what department they're in, and their title. Again, those might be important artifacts to help you throughout that investigation to decide what to do next. So that leads us into what are some of those remediation actions you can do. So some of the most basic thing you can do is you can tag an items or a series of items. You can do bulk actions, and some of the tags, compliant, non-compliant, or questionable. You can obviously apply a comment, which I did that. So that's one of the action you can take. Another action is you can just slap the user on the wrist and say, hey, this is not acceptable, especially if it's a first-time offender. And we give you the ability to do what we call send a notice. And you can pre-configure template. I've selected the record violation template I've configured in this tenant. And I can modify the parameter. I can blind carbon copy that person's manager or whatever. Pre-can template saying, hey, this is not acceptable. This is a violations that you of a policy, retake their training, blah, blah, blah. Another remediation action you can do is pretend I've analyzed that user is a repeat offender, but it's above my pay grade or it's above my responsibility to decide what to do next. I can easily escalate that to another person on my team. In this case, I click on escalate, and then the list of users that I can escalate to pops up. In this case, I get Adele on my team. I can put a little quick comment, repeat offender, please handle. And voila, what happens when I click escalate? Adele gets an email notifying her that I need her help to handle this case. And then when she clicks on it, instead of seeing, those 16 items that I filtered down for this policy, she'll only see this single one, really saving her time to decide then what to do next with this violator with regards to insider trading. The other remediation action that we've just introduced is pretend again those messages have some risk, and we want to make sure no one else sees it in our organization. So especially if it's a message shared, let's say on a team channel, and that channel has a lot of individuals, I can also remove that message so that both the sender and no one else that was part of this channel or a private message can see that message. So that's also something that customers have been asking that we recently delivered. And last but not least, for the most severe cases, if it's a repeat offender, if it's a severe violations of the law or the regulations that I'm trying to fulfill, I can pass those messages. In this case, it could be one, or in this case, those 3 messages to our legal team for further investigation. And the beauty here is that you already spent time reviewing the context on the users. So the beauty is suddenly those 3 and only those 3 are going to pass to the legal team. So really saving them time in the e-discovery process. So it's as simple as giving it a name, selecting the items that you want to pass to your legal team. You put in a note, and let me show you to close the loop. Here's what it would look like from an e-discovery perspective. So the legal team that has the permission to that, you're seeing the exact 3 messages that I flag for investigation to my legal team. And from there, they can pick it up and do additional searches back in time, look at other artifacts with respect to that users and whatever the legal team needs to do. With that, let's go back to other features that you can do that you care about to fulfill your regulatory compliance. And that's about proof of supervision. So typically, you need to show the regulator or internally or both that not only you're monitoring your regulated users, but also that you're taking action. So in here, you would click Export Reviewer Activity, and you pick a date range, and from there you would get every actions that all your reviewers took. And guess what? We have the same thing for policy. You can also export, so to show the regulator or internally to show, yes, I've got a policy in place monitoring my US brokers or my Canadian brokers or whatever it is. And again, you can audit that for a specific date range, and voila. Last but not least, we have a set of reports that shows you insights on all the violations and all the matches that policy and all the other policies caught. Now, in this example, I'm the administrator, so I'm going to see a lot more data. But if I was just the insider trading reviewers, all that data would be scoped down to the policy that I own and only that policy. So here we got a number of widgets. The first one to show you how many items where the policy is matching, and the second one is how much am I remediating. We'll also give you a top count of whatever top policy matches do we have, how many escalations has happened to policy, and then what are a top offender within your tenant. And guess what? We're not stopping there. We also have the ability to show you rich reporting where you can go at extremely granular level for each policy on what's going on in terms of how many items has it matched, how am I remediating those items, and so forth. So here's one report. Here's another one where in this case, it shows you each column's different statuses, so you can make sure that your team is again, not just catching fish is one thing, but investigating and remediating those violations. And then this last report shows you, in this case, by communication channels, how many violations do you have on Teams versus Yammer versus email, and so forth. That wraps up this quick demo of how to fulfill regulatory compliance with communication compliance. And before I go, a couple of key points I want to give you and leave you with. Now, to put a solution like that in place, typically it's a team effort. And depending on the use cases, you might have different stakeholders that needs to be involved. Obviously, IT typically is a good starting point, but you might have to involve human resources, legal, compliance, and so forth. So definitely encourage you to reach out to those different stakeholders to be successful in your usage of the solution. Now, last but not least, first and foremost, we have 3-hour skilling video that we highly recommend you watch. And to give you some call to actions, definitely configure policies in your tenant, investigate and remediate message, and give us feedback. Now, we also have a number of assets that you can consume, whether it's documentations, videos, public roadmap, to help you get started with communication compliance. Thank you very much.